As we welcome in our good friend Mike Silver, San Francisco Chronicle, and yes, all things 49ers, but man, that really stuck out last week, Mike, when you shared your conversation with Steve Kerr and how once upon a time he sort of compared the situations surrounding Trey Lance and James Wiseman in terms of, we're not sure what we've got. And a week later, I think it rings even more true now than it did when you said it 7 days ago.
Yeah, and I think the larger point was that, we won't know necessarily as quickly as people would like, right? So it's a process. And unfortunately for Trey Lance, he is injured, so this is going to get pushed into the next offseason. And that's what happened to Wiseman, obviously, in year two as well. So, it's tough out there in the NBA. I have a lot of faith in this Warrior team and, of course, the coach to problem solve and figure it out. I love watching Steph Curry elevate. It's one of the great pleasures in life. But you would think, you wouldn't need Steph playing an epic game to narrowly beat the Kings at home controversially at this stage. But, you also have to try to sort it out as you go and figure out what you have in those young guys. And that obviously goes for Kuminga and Moody and this year's draft picks too.
Yeah, and James Wiseman, who was unable to play in the aforementioned game. And nice long week of practice for the Warriors to get ready for a Friday game. And the Niners, similarly, Mike, coming off the bye, couple weeks to get ready for the Chargers. And Mark and I were talking about how expectations are skyrocketing. Are you feeling that inside the building, that coming off the bye, them getting healthy, that they have their eyes now on a bigger prize?
Well, I'm on my way down there now, so I'll know more. But, talking to guys after the Ram game in person, they were definitely feeling that. Like, Fred Warner was kind of like, look, you don't want to go 4-4, but, man, we're getting healthy. We're going to come back on fire. We're going to do our thing. So I definitely it's a lot better when you're 4-4 and you just won resoundingly heading into the bye week than if they were 3-5 going, well, we were 3-5 last year. We just have to go on another run with no margin for error. Now, the Seahawks did win again, so I do think they're real, and that game on the Thursday night in December in Seattle is going to be really, really interesting once we get there. I also thought it was funny, I talked to Brandon Staley a lot, the coach of the Chargers, and I told him after they won this last one in Atlanta, people talk about you guys like you're 2-6, and he goes, I know, it's the craziest thing. I don't understand. We're learning how to win. We're getting there. And, on Twitter, I just made some throwaway comment about, they play the Chargers this Sunday night. We'll see we'll see where they are. And someone goes, oh, the Chargers are a measuring stick now? And I go, yes. The 5-3 Chargers are a measuring stick for the 4-4 49ers. So, is it just me? But the Chargers get more scrutiny and weird, negativity, I feel like, than most teams with winning records.
Yeah, they do, Mike, but I think it's also understandable because for two reasons. One, they want them to pass the eye test a little bit better. Like, I don't have this in front of me, but I think they've got a negative point differential, even though they're 5-3. Justin Herbert's name was tossed around right next to Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes all offseason. In that division, there were huge expectations. I think the other side of it is also just the history of that organization. They play 17 road games every year. The dynamic. And so I think they've got so much talent. They're a big fantasy football team. People wanted them to come out and look like they were, taking names this year. And they're 5-3, but they haven't looked like that.
Well, 49er fans like to talk about injuries, and I get it, because they have probably been as impacted injury-wise in terms of significant players as any team, but the Chargers have a case. Keenan Allen really hasn't been a factor this year. Mike Williams has been out. They haven't injured Bosa, but much more injured. And J.C. Jackson, their big-time signee at cornerback, is now out, among others. So, it's a slog. You got to fight through it. They did play the Chiefs pretty well, and I don't know. I'm a little sensitive to they have so much talent, not just with them. Like the 49ers, I think it's pretty obvious, right? Like we would all look at most of their impact players at various positions and go, those guys are among the best at their position in the league, and it's a long list. But they're rare, and I heard the Colts for years had all this talent, and they had a lot of Pro Bowlers, and I used to take the counter argument, and my counter argument was the 5 most important positions. I think we'd all agree are quarterback, shutdown corner, edge rusher, left tackle, number 1 wide receiver. And if you look at those positions, they're not necessarily, finding answers. So you could say, wow, Chris Ballard drafted a guard really high, and that guy's a great guard. And, wow, they got an inside linebacker who's awesome. And, ooh, they got a running back. But, I think a lot of times when you hear about a team's talent, that's maybe the GM putting it out there. Man, we're good. We should really win. And I know Tom Telesco is probably not a big talker that way, media-wise, the Chargers GM, but I think Chris Ballard has a lot of people in my business under his spell, and I think we saw that Jim Irsay is not necessarily subscribing to that same theory. It's a tough business. It's a performance business, and bottom line is the Chargers have found to be 5-3. The 49ers probably look like a stronger team as they're currently constituted, but it is absolutely a measuring stick for a team that lost to the Broncos, the Bears, and the Falcons, and arguably has one good win, depending on what you believe the Rams are. In retrospect, that win over the Seahawks was a really good win.
Yeah, exactly. And they got the Seahawks again one more time. And coming off a bye, you would feel as if the Niners are in a perfect spot for this game. Doesn't seem like the Chargers run the ball very often. Do they use the short passing game as their rush attack? And how does that affect what the Niners try to do?
Yeah, I think they'd like to run more, and they'd like to stop the run better, certainly. You saw what Brandon Staley did in his 1 year as the Rams defensive coordinator that got him that job that was so impressive. And last year their defense was a mess, so they brought in reinforcements like J.C. Jackson, who is out, Khalil Mack, who does not have or has not had Joey Bosa opposite him, and Kyle Van Noy, who quietly has helped kind of fortify them among others. But they are having trouble stopping the run. And then as far as running the ball, I think Austin Eckler has shown he can be productive. But they just you're right about the eye test, Mark. It just hasn't looked smooth on offense, and part of that is they have had their best skill player, Keenan Allen, has either been out or limited, and they haven't been right, but they do put a lot on Justin Herbert, and obviously that was exacerbated when he suffered the rib injury and, clearly wasn't himself out there.
Mike Silver with us, as he is every week on Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. So, Mike, let's circle back to the high expectations that have sort of been redeveloped now for the 49ers. Every time they win a game, it's like, okay, they're the second best team in the NFC. And so it's kind of 4 things that have happened. They beat the Rams, they got a bye, they're getting healthy, and Christian McCaffrey's on the team. But in your opinion, are we now are the 49ers in somewhat of a dangerous spot because expectations are so high, and through the first 8 games, there really hasn't been the consistency to match that?
Yeah, the expectations are what make it dangerous, but the consistency is the key, and you hit that exactly. So, look, usually when we look back and say that was a championship team, it's not, wow, when they were good, they looked amazing, because that applies to the 49ers for sure, especially with McCaffrey, and that was without Devo and Juszczyk, by the way. But yeah, when they look good, they look unbelievable. But usually it's more, man, when things were bad, they found a way to have fortitude and gut it out. And when things were average, they found a way to prevail. And they're not doing that yet. And I talked to one coach over the bye who just said, look, we are, I won't use the exact words he used, but basically we're an inconsistent mess, and we're really, proud of how it ended before the bye, and that was a really good win. But, we got to find a way to establish some sort of consistency, and so that's why not only are the Chargers a measuring stick, it all is. And, we don't know exactly, maybe we'll look back and go, the Falcons were actually a pretty good team. And, now we know the Seahawks, who they annihilated, are a pretty good team. And I think we're going to look back and say, the Rams were just bad this year, et cetera, et cetera. But, we still have this vision of the end of last year, and we saw what it looked like in the first real game with McCaffrey, and they've got all these guys who are really, difference makers, and so expectations should be high. If you're an Eagle fan, do you want a juiced-up 49er team coming into Philly in the playoffs? You do not. On the other hand, and this is a big if, I don't think saying, they've had bad injury luck at this point is a clear depiction of things. They got a lot of guys who are older and who get hurt a lot, and it is what it is. But is Deebo Samuel going to be a guy where you look back at his career and go, the way he plays, he was always fresh and, not impacted in any given game? You are not. You're seeing Eric Armstead, who's so important now with multiple injuries. That's a big, big one. Some of it is luck, but some of it is you get a bunch of older guys, Trent Williams, who you hope are going to be healthy when it counts, but, you are going to have to dig deep and find something within yourself as a team. It won't just be your scheme is better, although it usually is. It won't just be your players are better or your difference makers are better, although they are usually. It's going to have to be something to what happened last year. And by the way, every 49er fan, get down on your knees right now and give thanks that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch assessed the situation, said it would be a distraction and it would be bad for Trey Lance's development to do this, but somehow Jimmy Garoppolo might come back on the cheap. Let's do this as a hedge because that's your only chance right now.
Mike Silver, great stuff. Drive safe. By the way, if you talk to Brandon Staley all the time, it would be helpful for everybody to know. Are they going for it on every fourth down this weekend? Every other fourth down? What's the plan?
I will. If I find that out, I won't tell you until after the fact, because that would probably reduce the amount of times I talk to Brandon Staley in the future. But let's just say he's going down swinging most of the time, and I think he's comfortable with that.
No doubt, man. All right, Mike. Great stuff. Thank you as always.
Thanks, you guys.
Okay, that's Mike Silver.